Well, hello. My name is Mike Van Quickenborn, and I'm just recording this short video as part of my application to join the 2026-2027 Humanities Washington Speakers Bureau. And so in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Great. And so what I'm going to be talking to you about today is my presentation, at least this draft of it, entitled AI and the Challenge to the Human/Humanities. Um, I have been a philosophy instructor for over 30 years, mostly at Everett Community College, where I'm currently employed, but also at other colleges throughout the state of Washington. Um, and in my experience being a philosophy instructor, and especially in the last few years, I've really had to think about artificial intelligence and what it means for, in particular, humanities education, right? Philosophy, but also humanity as a whole. And so I have put together, as I said, sort of a draft of a presentation here. I call it a draft mostly because if I were to be selected to join the Speakers Bureau, as you probably are aware, right, AI is a moving target. It's constantly developing and changing. And so I would need to be continuing to update this presentation just to keep track of the latest developments in this field. In fact, the resources I've used to come up with this presentation are mostly things I've come up with here in the last year for sure. So it's a very dynamic sort of field. And so I want to, try and present my audience with the latest information about that. Um, I do want to say that, again, I'm a philosophy instructor. I'm not a computer science instructor. And so this presentation would not be technical in any sense. I would definitely come at the audience with the idea that they may have limited understanding of artificial intelligence and what it is capable of. And I, will show you here in just a few minutes what it can do in various ways. So we'll get into that in a minute. But before we do that, let me go ahead and give you an overview of the argument that I'm trying to make here in this presentation. Uh, First of all, I'm going to talk to the audience about how actually I think that AI can be dangerous for various reasons, but also, of course, that AI has appropriate uses as well. And so I want to, give the audience a sense of both of those things, and also in a very interactive way so that they can get a sense as to the powers of AI for themselves. And I'll show you that here in a minute. Um, but I also want to focus in on an inappropriate use of artificial intelligence, which is plagiarism. And plagiarism, especially in humanities courses. I've seen this, of course, in my philosophy classes. And I understand that plagiarism might seem to be not, the biggest deal in terms of society. But actually, I do intend to make an argument here that, in fact, despite the fact that AI is dangerous in a variety of ways, I personally see the biggest danger of AI in terms of this plagiarism dimension that it has. Because it is very easy for students to avoid thinking about the humanities because they can just turn to artificial intelligence in order to do their work, right? So they don't have to read the great thinkers of history and then respond to prompts as a result. They can simply have an AI do the work for them. Uh, and that actually is combined with a trend in society and in education at large that suggests that education is really just about helping people to get a better job. And of course, it is in part to help people to do that. But in recent years, especially, I think, education has become focused on solely that aspect. And that means that students have come to see education, especially college education, as basically transactional, right? Students are going to give money to an institution and then expect a degree in response. And if education is purely transactional, I think it is likely, or at least leads to this idea that whatever it takes to get that degree, because they're paying a lot of money, right, to get a college degree. And so they'll do whatever it takes to get that degree, which I think tempts them to perhaps make use of artificial intelligence in order to plagiarize. Um, and what that then leads to, right, are very dangerous effects on democratic societies as a whole, because we need students to be able to think about things like the humanities, need to be able to think about and talk about and argue about um, things that they might disagree with other people in society with, in order to have a democracy. And if they have no practice doing that, because they haven't really gone through that process in humanities classes, they are going to be unprepared to live in a democratic society. And so I do think the situation is actually fairly dire, but I do end the presentation by exhorting both students, who I think is a good audience for this presentation, as well as, their parents and of course society as a whole. But I want to exhort students to think for themselves and not let AI do their thinking for them, because they want to live in a democratic society. But also, I do want to challenge educational institutions, politicians, right, that provide funding for them, to understand that education is not just about getting a good job at the end of that process, but it's also about making good citizens for participating in a democratic society. So, to give you a better sense of that here, I'm not going to actually go into presenter mode with these slides, but I am going to just kind of skim through this to give you a sense as to what my presentation would look like if I am chosen for the Speakers Bureau. I start with, of course, an outline of the presentation. As I've already said, I want to talk to people about the dangers of AI. Then I want to talk to, as I put it here, what AI can have. In other words, what are appropriate uses for artificial intelligence? Then, as I've said, right, I want to focus in on artificial intelligence and the human education, right, but also slash humanities education in particular. And then end with what I'm arguing for here, what AI cannot have, and that is we cannot allow it at least to do our thinking for us. Because if we do that, we will be unprepared to think through the many problems that we face in any democratic society. So we have the dangers of AI, and I'll just here give you a sample of these different areas that I'll be talking about. But of course, one of the dangers that many people have recognized from AI is its ability to manipulate people politically. And so what I always like to do in any presentation I give is sort of, reach out and pull the audience in right away with something interactive. And so here, I'd ask the audience, well, does this image look fake to you or not? And then we can kind of think about why it is or isn't fake. I mean, this is in fact an authentic picture of our governor. But then again, to push that a little further here with a little game I like to call "Will the real politician please stand up?" Right? So one of these images has been generated by Google Gemini, and the other two are authentic pictures of Washington state senators. Um, but can the audience actually tell the difference, and how can they tell the difference, right? It isn't clear, I think, from these images. So immediately, hopefully, the audience will get an idea that AI has very powerful abilities, and it's really going to be difficult for people to tell the difference between something that's been generated as fake and then what is, truly authentic. Um, Many other dangers, of course, with AI in terms of environmental destruction, in terms of that it takes a great deal of energy to create AI images and create AI results. War, of course, is a possibility, right? With a sort of a tongue-in-cheek look there at the Terminator. Pandemic, right? AI may be being able to be used to create biological weapons. AI, it has been suggested, will lead to greater wealth inequality. So we look at that briefly. And of course, many people are afraid, especially younger people, about AI leading to mass unemployment. Finally, a danger that I like to talk about here, and this is again sort of an interaction with the audience, is to look at a website that is an example of surveillance capitalism, because AI can be used to take a photograph and come to all kinds of conclusions from that photograph, just one photograph. So I think that is tends to be pretty eye-opening for audiences. So then, as I said, I want to move to what AI can have, and that is what can it be used appropriately for? And I start, a humorous example of generating an internet meme, which I don't truly understand, honestly, but ICANN has cheeseburger is apparently one of these. And if somebody wants to use AI to generate an internet meme, I say by all means go for it. But there are many other things that people have used AI for that may or may not be appropriate. But for example, mathematics, right? Artificial intelligence helping mathematicians, I think is very appropriate. But here I think is a nice quote from a book that I think has a lot of interesting things to say about artificial intelligence. And this is from the author and poet Brian Christian, who asks, does the fact that computers are so good at mathematics in some sense take away an arena of human activity, or does it free us from having to do non-human activity, liberating us into a more human life, right? And this is a fundamental question, I think, for any application of artificial intelligence. I certainly would argue that, yeah, mathematicians shouldn't be forced to, work out multiplication by hand, right? They should be able to take advantage of calculators and computers to do that. But where do we draw that line? And that comes up right away here in my presentation because I uh, I do something with the audience called a poetry off, as I'm calling it here, because a recent scientific study in the journal Scientific Reports showed that people cannot tell the difference between poetry that's been created by humans and poetry that has been written by artificial intelligence. And so actually, I'll go ahead and show you this here, how this would work, right? So I would show them this snippet of poetry and then ask them to compare it with this snippet of poetry. And again, just see if they can tell the difference between something that's been generated by artificial intelligence and a human. And then, of course, reveal the answer, right? The first snippet here is from ChatGPT writing in the style of Walt Whitman. And then the other one, of course, is actually from the poet Walt Whitman. And of course, I think that's fascinating, right? But what's maybe even more interesting is the fact that this report found that not only could non-experts, at least, not tell the difference between artificially intelligent generated poetry and actual human poetry, humans in the study preferred the AI generated poetry. And I think that raises all kinds of interesting questions about the purpose of art and what art does, right? And I think many people would argue, myself included, that art is meant to challenge us. Um, and AI poetry doesn't do that. And people, at least a lot of people, tend to prefer not to be challenged, right? So, should AI be used to create poetry? I don't know. Should it be used to create visual artwork? We'll think about that. AI can be used to create music now, including with lyrics, right? And so I'll show this brief video clip here to show the audience, what AI again can do. Beyond that, people are now more and more turning to AI for romantic relationships. And we talk about that here with an example. And also, AI has been used to connect with dearly deceased loved ones. And here's a recent effort that deals with that. Then, as I said, I go into specifically how AI has impacted education, right? I've been an educator for over 3 decades now. And so I have some things to say about this, especially with regard to, again, humanities education. And so I talk to the audience about that landscape and my concerns there. Um, and then finally, I make my sort of final push here to argue that we really cannot let AI take over writing and thinking, right? These two things are intimately connected. Because if we do, we're not going to know how to communicate with others effectively. We're not going to know how to get along with others effectively. And that is really the best and most important gift that the humanities brings to people, right? It enables us to live with people who differ from us but who we can get along with because we can communicate with them, we can live in community with them. And so, as I said, then I will end my presentation with these exhortations again for students especially to choose to think for yourself, but then also for everyone in society, right? To remember that education is not just about getting a job; it's about learning how to live with people who differ from us. So I'm really excited about this presentation. I think this is something that people across our state really need to hear about and think about. And so I do hope that I'll get the opportunity to speak to them. So thanks for listening to all this and watching this as well. And I hope to talk to you later. Thank you very much. I'm going to try and stop the recording. All right. I'm going to stop the sharing here. And yeah, let me stop the recording now.